One glaring reality of our existence here on Earth is that it has been rather short. Anatomically modern humans have only walked the Earth for about 300,000 years, and recorded history begins much more recently. Anything that happened before the advent of writing, roughly just over 5,000 years ago, only survives in oral tales, often distorted by the march of time. This means that most of Earth's existence, it has been both habitable, inhabited, but without intelligent life to record anything. That's literally billions of years, and Earth has been broadcasting its biosignatures long enough for anyone in the galaxy to hypothetically know about this world, and that its atmosphere is being altered by a biosphere. Earth as a habitable planet blew its cover long before we ever got here. So is it possible that sometime in the past, Earth was visited by an alien civilization? The answer is yes. The universe and the laws of physics do not prohibit such a thing. Indeed, the Fermi Paradox is predicated on the notion that we really should see aliens everywhere, including here, and for some reason, we do not. This prompted Enrico Fermi to ask the question, where are they? After all, we live in a galaxy over 13 billion years old that's been habitable for billions of years before Earth even formed. It's only 100,000 light years across, so it could have been traversed at sublight speeds by anyone many times over. You could position a von Neumann probe self-replicating and traveling at doable speeds in every star system in the Milky Way. You don't need an Alcubierre drive or FTL to accomplish this. All you need is time. And not that much of it, geologically speaking, only a few million years. So the question is, why hasn't anyone done this? The answer may be simple. Perhaps they have, and we just haven't been around long enough to know about it. Unfortunately, as far as Earth itself goes, we can't know if anyone ever did. This planet weathers evidence almost completely. We have a very incomplete fossil record as a result, and what we do have is by sheer luck. Entire strata of rock get weathered away over time, and the action of wind and water is relentless. If an alien civilization had ever stopped by and left any evidence of their visit, it would be unbelievably unlikely to ever find any evidence of it. And that's assuming that they didn't pack out their trash, leaving no traces at all. It's even possible that they colonized Earth for a time, on some limited basis, but the colony didn't take and all traces of it are gone. What we do know is that they don't seem to have messed with the evolution and progression of life on this world. We see no mass extinctions, for example, that appear to have no other possible cause than alien overhunting. Our genome also appears unaltered, as do the genomes of all life on Earth that we've studied so far. Everything looks completely natural. That's not to say something might not be found. There have been claims within circles studying DNA SETI that there are some odd features that might be evidence of tampering, but so far this has not been definitive or widely accepted within the scientific community. To quote Sagan, "Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and this has not been forthcoming." But on the other hand, while Earth is a bad place to look for evidence of alien life, other areas of the solar system may be ideal. It's even possible that some kind of message was left just in case this planet ever produced a civilization. One good place to look is the surface of the moon. It has been suggested that given the longevity of objects on the moon, any equipment buried there could last for billions of years. If an alien civilization passed through and deposited something there, say 100 million years ago, it's probably still there, so long as it was robustly constructed. Another option, should they not want to leave technology, would be evidence of alien biology. This scenario is one of the more odd, but plausible ones. Fossils are rocks, and leaving a giant prepared fossil of an animal, or one of the aliens themselves, on the moon is actually doable if you want to transport it halfway across the galaxy. Such a thing would have isotope differences far different from Earth, and we could reasonably know we were looking at an alien equivalent of a dinosaur. Oddly enough, there's no reason this couldn't happen naturally. Rock can be blasted off the surface of the Earth, including fossil-bearing sedimentary rock. It's entirely possible that fossils from Earth litter the solar system, and some of the planets, such as Mars or the Moon. Conversely, fossil-bearing materials could have been blasted off exoplanets to wander the galaxy as interstellar objects, and someday, just maybe, we might confirm alien life from an interstellar meteorite bearing fossil evidence. Entire chunks of exoplanets are passing through our star system all the time. We need only to go study them. And while the vast majority will not be sedimentary rock, it is in principle possible for it to be out there. The as-yet non-existent science of astropaleontology aside, any civilization passing through might choose to leave artifacts of technological origin. And this is where it gets spooky, as in the monolith from 2001, or Arthur C. Clarke's preceding short story, The Sentinel. The possibilities here are endless. You could leave some piece of technology that somehow tells the story of the alien species, if that could be deciphered, to something a bit more scary, a warning, even an unintentional one. This gets into the realities of recovering alien technology. So in the spirit of Spooky October, let me spin a scenario. Imagine we recovered an object of alien origin, whether on the surface of the moon or in natural collection points where captured interstellar objects are thought to congregate. It could be an intentional warning, such as the deposition of materials that speak to the aliens telling us that they are highly advanced, or be careful, there's something far worse than you realize lurking out here, to unintentional warnings like discarded spare parts from a piece of technology. The reason this is spooky is in how we would interpret such a finding. If we recovered a piece of alien technology that was highly advanced, far and away more advanced than anything we're currently able to produce, it's highly unlikely we'd ever be able to determine what it is, how it was manufactured, and what its function was. That type of back engineering will not be easy should it ever come to pass. If you have just a part of something, say a fragment of metal, chances are it's going to not be complete enough to know what it is. An example would be a car. If you found a starter assembly of a car, but you knew nothing else, you might be able to figure out how it works to a degree. But without the rest of the car, you can't really know its function. You just don't have enough to reconstruct what it was. And someone just 1,000 years ago looking at a starter would not have been able to even envision what its true function was. But it gets worse from there. A starter doesn't tell you anything about the infrastructure needed to operate the car. You can't know about gasoline, for example, and thusly you can't know about gas stations, refineries, oil wells, and so on. You are completely at a loss as to guessing the infrastructure behind the object. This is likely with incomplete alien technology. All we would know there is that there is alien life somewhere that came here, or was sending out materials populating the galaxy as interstellar objects. But you wouldn't know where those aliens are today. Might they be close by or far away? What are the effects of finding out there is a much, much more drastically advanced alien civilization in some kind of proximity to you? What are their intentions? Do they intend to someday seize this world? Are we being watched? If so, why? What if the artifact is part of a weapon? What if it works on incomprehensible levels, a technology we can't even envision due to an incomplete knowledge of physics? Any discovery of an object of alien origin that we don't know its function would automatically be spooky. Of course, there are UAP tales out there that claim this. It's the elephant in the room, and I'm just going to outright say it. And even materials that are being privately held that are purportedly linked to UAP. Though isotopically, most of them seem to be material originating from Earth. There are a few, however, that are off. Intriguing, but not proof. And to my knowledge, none of the described candidates appear to be complete objects, just bits and pieces. Not conclusive. And of course, there are stories like Roswell. But those usually involve crashes, and as someone that spends their career trying to envision alien life, I can't quite wrap my head around a highly advanced alien civilization traveling across light years of space only to crash into New Mexico. If true, they're not the sharpest cookies in the drawer, and they really need the equivalent of an FAA to ensure the safety of their vehicles. That's assuming, however, that aliens wouldn't intentionally crash technology on a planet as a warning. They might. But what I can say, as a kid, I well remember being spooked by those stories. Anything alien evokes the unknown, and the idea of aliens being close is exponentially spookier. Anyone that remembers the story of KIC 8462852, the whole reason I started this channel, will remember a time where all we had was the Kepler data, and there was the possibility that we were seeing the activities of an alien civilization. That alone was spooky. Imagine if one key thing had happened. Studies of the wavelengths of light had shown that it was solid objects blocking the light. We would have gone deeper into megastructure construction territory, but that turned out to not be the case. The reality is that it's probably dust in some weird juxtaposition. But think about it. Had it been unambiguously alien, we would have been seeing a highly advanced civilization that existed 1,500 years ago, constructing something of unknown utility very distantly from Earth. People often ask me for updates on that star, but unfortunately there's not much to report. Observations are ongoing at several observatories, and the question of periodicity remains. It's unclear if the objects are in orbit of the star or what period they are on, or if they are something else. But what is clear overall is that the dips are much shallower than what Kepler initially saw, suggesting a collisional model where Kepler happened to just catch the aftermath of some colliding objects, and it's dissipated and died down in the years since. As usual with a star though, that doesn't explain everything, since there is evidence in past photographic plates of dimmings previous to Kepler's observations. So stay tuned. The moment I hear anything more on that star, I'll make a video. The distance and time factor of that made it somewhat of a spooky story, literally looking back in time at past aliens. But contrast that to something close. The closer the alien technology, the spookier it is. After all, if it's in this star system, then chances are someone knows about us. But there's one other option for evidence of a past presence of an alien civilization in the solar system, and it's weird asteroids. So far our asteroids look unaltered, but we've really only taken a close look at a very small sample compared to what's out there in the solar system. But an asteroid that has been mined in the past by some passing through alien civilization would be evident in that it would basically be a bunch of tailings left over, devoid of whatever metals they were mining. This is more benign. It would mean that some von Neumann self-replicator or alien starship passed through, needing to manufacture some replacement parts and used one of our asteroids. This doesn't mean they visited Earth or even cared about it, only that they made a pit stop and then continued on their way, rendezvous with Rama style, and headed off for parts unknown. And such a thing could have happened billions of years ago for all we know, and the aliens that mined it would be long gone or extinct. The overarching question, however, is that if Earth had ever been visited in the past by aliens, why were they here? What drew them to this place? Even if we found evidence, we may never know the answer, but there's one final possibility in all of this, that the technology or evidence left behind is not defunct, but active and merely waiting for us to discover it. The motives, intents, and capabilities of such a sleeper probe would initially be totally unknown until it did something. It could do anything, from being a benign hello machine to a berserker that attacks with only the slightest provocation, put there by a civilization like landmines in a war zone. What if first contact is the point that you find that you are stuck in the middle of an enormous, slow galactic war between highly advanced civilizations, and there's nothing you can do about it? You are only in the way. Thanks for listening. I am futurist and science fiction author John Michael Godier, currently eyeing the DART mission dubiously. Yes, it's great, we can now move asteroids, but watching that thing come in for the strike, I was left saying to Anna, gee, I sure hope there weren't any dinosaurs on Dimorphos. There aren't any more. Such are the dangers of near-asteroid Earths with projectile-firing hominids living on them. Very sordid, the whole thing, and be sure to check out my books at your favorite online book retailer and subscribe to my channels for regular, in-depth explorations into the interesting, weird, and unknown aspects of this amazing universe in which we live. When discussing SETI and the Fermi Paradox, the focus tends to be on distance, the idea that an alien civilization could exist in relatively close proximity to Earth, enough that we could detect them. So far, we haven't found anything, but there is another aspect to the potential existence of exocivilizations, that they may be relatively common in the history of the Milky Way, but we simply do not exist at the same time they do, either that they existed far in the past or will exist far in the future. The first possibility is that there was once someone else here, but are no longer, either through self-destruction, destruction at the hands of another exocivilization or cataclysmic event, or even unforeseen ways a highly technological civilization could simply up and disappear. A civilization like this is possible because the Milky Way has been able to form planets far longer than our solar system has existed. The current oldest exoplanet we know of comes in at about 12.7 billion years. Whether exoplanets that formed early in the Milky Way's history could have the right composition to be Earth-like and produce a civilization is up for debate, but it's at least hypothetically possible, and such a civilization, even though extinct, may have left artifacts or at least evidence of their former existence that we might detect as we explore the galaxy. But it's also possible that we are early in the curve and that humanity might be among the earliest civilizations present in the Milky Way. There are a number of reasons this could be, dealing largely in unanswered scientific questions. Is life easy to start chemically? We don't know yet. Does life develop complexity very slowly? Earth suggests it does, but again, we don't know. What conditions have to be present for intelligent life to arise? Are those common or rare? There are arguments that they are probably rare. As a result, we may be early in the game, and that the solution to the Fermi Paradox and the lack of detection so far of alien civilizations is that we are among the earliest to arise. But this brings up another possibility. If time is key, then will civilizations become more prevalent in the Milky Way as time goes on? The universe is still fairly young. It could last for an immense amount of time, and while its period of star and planet formation will eventually come to an end, it's chock full of some very long-lived types of stars that will be here billions of years after our own sun goes red giant, with more stars yet to form. These long-lived stars, the red and orange dwarfs, could allow for environments that allow life to evolve for much longer periods of time than we had here on Earth. If so, as the universe ages, this might allow for an explosion or blossoming of intelligent life billions of years from now, as life has had longer to evolve and develop intelligence. But that's not the only way it could happen. If we colonize the galaxy or any contemporary civilization to us, then we could just as easily create aliens of our own. One way this can happen is uplifting, where we, or someone else, could upgrade a natural species, either from Earth or one we might find in space, to be smarter, or if not that, more biologically suited to leave their home planet. An example here would be a water world, where aquatic life might be intelligent, but might be trapped by their conditions and physiology and rendered incapable of harnessing fire, or for that matter, building rockets. This could be very relevant here on Earth. If we survive for hundreds of thousands or millions of years or longer, evolution on this world could move towards other intelligent species arising here. A good example would be the dolphins. There is some thinking that they aren't that far behind us as far as evolving intelligence goes, and that Earth in the distant future might be home to two intelligent civilizations, though one might not be capable of developing technology. Would we help them out? Or might somebody come by and help us out? It's always possible, and we're already asking this question of ourselves, that biology is inferior to technology, and that we might someday transcend biology to become a machine civilization. I'm not sure we'd ever really do that, but what if it were forced onto us, similar to perhaps the Borg or the Reapers from Mass Effect? What if we weren't first, and out there lurks a far older civilization, perhaps one made up of machines? Thanks for listening. I'm science fiction author and futurist John Michael Godier, currently addressing those that are calling me the Bob Ross of Science YouTube. Let's put a happy little neutron star irradiating an exoplanet over here. Except that I can't paint, so it would look like some fried eggs that were run over by a Chrysler LeBaron. There are limits to what I can do, folks, and be sure to check out my books at your favorite online book retailer and subscribe to my channels for regular in-depth explorations into the interesting, weird, and unknown aspects of this amazing universe in which we live. One of the most popular and perhaps compelling solutions to the Fermi Paradox is that intelligent life is simply incredibly rare in the universe, and that's why we see no definitive evidence of it. A variant of this thinking, however, is that while intelligence may be rare right now, it may eventually become very common, and a veritable explosion of intelligent life might come to be in the universe's future. This can happen in two ways, but before we get into that, it's worth noting that there could be two completely separate paths for life in the universe. The first is Earth, where a terrestrial planet with surface liquid water gives rise to life and the possibility of the eventual evolution of intelligent life on it. The other is more tricky, since while we know they exist, and we can speculate about their chances for harboring life, we don't yet know if they actually do. These are the ice shell moons, such as Europa. What we know even less about are the conditions and evolutionary possibilities on worlds with oceans locked under ice. Might they only be able to produce microbes, or could something more complex evolve? It's an open question, but what doesn't seem likely about ice shell worlds is that they could ever develop intelligent species. How does one master fire in an ocean environment? How does one build advanced technology, and so on? Would such a landless environment ever favor the rise of intelligence at all? It could be that primitive life abounds on worlds like Enceladus and Europa throughout the universe, but never produce civilizations. But with terrestrial planets like Earth, we ourselves prove that it can happen. But how common are worlds like Earth? We don't know yet, but one line of thinking is that they aren't very common at all. Our Sun, for example, isn't the most common type of star in the Milky Way. It's significantly beat out by the red and orange dwarfs. How common are Earth-like worlds within the habitable zones of Sun-like stars? We don't yet know, but there is no guarantee that they would be common. And even then, would they host the right mix for intelligent life to arise? Just the right amount of land and water, plate tectonics, a sufficiently well-sized and placed moon, all of these things may have played major roles in the process that led to us. This is usually termed the rare Earth hypothesis, and that the reason we don't see evidence of alien civilizations is because Earth is rare, and even then, what may be yet rarer is the development of intelligence on an Earth-like planet. Earth had hosted life for billions of years before humans and our hominid relatives ever came on the scene, and had the conditions for their evolution not happened to have been just so, then Earth would still be a planet full of reptiles, mammals, and complex life, but nothing capable of ever creating a technological civilization. Perhaps most Earth-like planets, rare as they might be, simply remain dumb, and we are on the galaxy's lottery winner, where everything came together just so. But what of the future? Might other environments around red dwarfs become better able to host life in the future? Might that lead to an eventual explosion of life in the galaxy? Might that, in turn, lead to an eventual explosion of intelligence? Just such an idea was advanced by Abraham Loeb and colleagues linked to their paper below. Essentially, since small type M red dwarfs are far more plentiful than any other kinds of stars, and they live extremely long lives but early on are too active for life to get much of a foothold, it may be the case that later in their lives that equation changes. And there are also the type K orange dwarf stars, which may offer the best chances of all stars for Earth-like life, but may not have had enough time for intelligence to arise. In short, this solution to the Fermi Paradox would simply mean that, yes, we are alone as far as we are likely to know regarding intelligent alien life, but not forever. And even if there never is an explosion of intelligence in the Milky Way, there is at least us. Should we survive and colonize the galaxy, the great distances and communications times involved would favor that our colonies might become isolated. After enough time has passed, those colonies that might have started out as human might end up something very alien to each other indeed. Thanks for listening. I am science fiction author and futurist John Michael Godier, currently dubious about aliens smarter than we are. Maybe there are planets even better at hosting intelligence than Earth is, and they look on our planet as a habitable but otherwise dumb exoplanet. The more I do this channel, the more I find myself pondering alien civilizations suspiciously. And be sure to check out my books at your favorite online book retailer and subscribe to my channel for regular in-depth explorations into the interesting, weird, and unknown aspects of this amazing universe in which we live. One of the most vexing and profound open questions within science is what is the process of abiogenesis, the emergence of life from non-living organic chemistry. It remains very much unclear what exactly happened there, to the point that it can't yet be said if the process is a fluke and may have happened only a handful of times in the entire universe, or even only once, or if the process is relatively straightforward and happens everywhere it can. making for a universe likely to be teeming with at least simple life. We currently have two potential ways to solve this mystery. The first is to directly find life independent of Earth. This can happen through searching for microbial life on other solar system bodies such as Mars or Europa, or discovering evidence of biosignatures on exoplanets, or even finding a technosignature of an alien civilization. The second way is to work out the chemical process of abiogenesis in the laboratory. There is work being done on both approaches, however much of it remains a mystery. But if abiogenesis turns out to be a difficult process, then we are faced with yet another mystery. As it stands right now, one of the reasons that it's thought that abiogenesis probably isn't a rare process is because it happened seemingly at the very first possible moment it could here on Earth. There's even some evidence that's still being debated that would place the dawn of life on Earth back into the late heavy bombardment, when Earth had to have been only marginally habitable for life at all. That abiogenesis, if a rare process, happened under those somewhat extreme conditions seems highly unlikely. But that idea also assumes that simple life is isolated to the planet that it arises upon. This may not be the case. It may be that simple life can be transported between planets and seed them, an idea known generally as panspermia, but perhaps more accurately transpermia. It's possible, so far as we know, for microbes to hitch a ride on rocks blasted from planetary surfaces early in the solar system's history, and land on other terrestrial objects and seed them if the conditions are right. This leads to an interesting idea, to say the least. The idea is that life on Earth did not originate here. This opens up a number of candidates, such as Venus, or even very odd places for life to arise have been advanced, at least to be hypothetically possible, such as the seemingly water-rich asteroid series. But one candidate stands out. It's Mars, and very early in that planet's history, it seems to have had more going for it as far as life appearing than Earth did. Mars seems to have offered a series of conditions better for life early in its history than Earth had at the same time. One particularly catastrophic event in Earth's history wasn't just the constant bombardment it was subject to, but also the collision of Earth with Theia that seems to have formed the Moon. These are not ideal conditions for life to arise. Also, while Mars had liquid water oceans at the time, the amount of water in them was less than Earth. This would have lessened the effect of steam blanketing the planets along with dust during impacts. Another is that Mars, being smaller, cooled faster than Earth, which would have allowed for a subsurface environment for microbes avoiding the surface during impacts much earlier than Earth had it. All of this points to Mars potentially being habitable as far back as 4.5 billion years ago, shortly after the formation of the solar system, as opposed to Earth's 3.8 billion year limit on how early life seems to have appeared. And then there are questions about both environments. One would be what life had available to it when it started up. It would have needed nutrients. But in a stagnant, isolated tidal pool on Earth, this might have been a problem, given that life would tend to consume all the nutrients in the pool and then die off. So wherever it happened presumably wasn't very isolated. Also, the very earliest life would not have had the time needed to develop the robust adaptations of later life to its environment. In other words, it would have very likely have been extremely delicate. Earth, during the late heavy bombardment, does not seem like an environment for the delicate. Life also needs to expand into other niches to survive. But if that niche where life arose was somehow special and presented very specific circumstances that allowed for the magic to happen, is it very likely that other nearby niches would be colonizable to such delicate emergent life? And how does that change? Do certain processes require drier conditions to favor the needed chemistry? Or do wetter environments offer advantages? And how do exposure to the two fit together? This leads to a huge question, but one that might be revealing in itself. Does abiogenesis have to happen many times on a world just to get it right? If so, then that would imply that the process is generally easy if a certain group of long-term conditions are met, or that the conditions for it are very rare on exoplanets, but occasionally do happen. And when they do, they tend to last a long while, to allow for multiple instances of life appearing to stick. But this leads to another question. If Earth had the conditions necessary for life to arise, does it still have them while supporting life? If so, then we should see evidence of many distinct appearances of life on Earth. So far, we have not seen this. It appears to have only happened once. Why this is, or if life itself prevents other life from arising, is unknown. And it's also possible that life is rare, but inherently resilient, and once it gets going, it becomes increasingly difficult to snuff it out if it gets past a certain stage of growth. This opens up the possibility that a rock from Earth could have acted as an arc, where life was ejected from the planet into space and went extinct on Earth, only to be redeposited back on it later when the life-bearing meteorite fell back on the planet after some period in space while the planet recovered from the impact. But within all of this is one interesting point that's been raised. In a paper by Paul Davies, linked below, he details that if life is indeed rare in the universe, and given the past conditions of both Earth and Mars when life appeared on Earth, then it may actually be that Mars is significantly, 6 or more times, likely to be the place of origin for life in the solar system than Earth is, in which case our origin very likely becomes Mars. The last question in all of this widens the scope. Is it possible that life in the star system may not have started here at all? After all, the possibility of panspermia does sometimes include life crossing interstellar distances and being deposited here from another star system. This issue has one problem. Crossing the interstellar medium is hard, and it takes a very long time. It would have to have been life far more special than what we have here to be able to survive it, except in one scenario. The solar system has passed very closely to other star systems many times over its history, most of which we will never know ever happened. It's essentially impossible to reconstruct what star passed by the Sun when, beyond a certain point in time, and anything from 3.8 billion years ago or longer is lost information. So if life was deposited here from a passing star system, perhaps undergoing impacts of its own, we will likely never know it happened that way, if indeed it did, but it remains a possibility. Thanks for listening. I am futurist and science fiction author John Michael Godier, currently worried about interplanetary microbe relations. If the solar system teems with life, it's likely to be largely microbial, even if other macrofauna are found off Earth in the ocean of an ice shell moon. And it's true here, Earth can be described as a microbial planet that has some other complex life living on it. But the microbes rule, and they may rule the solar system. What if they interact and don't get along? We're at their mercy, and be sure to check out my books at your favorite online book retailer and subscribe to my channels for regular in-depth explorations into the interesting, weird, and unknown aspects of this amazing universe in which we live. When thinking about SETI and alien life, we tend to look to the distant stars themselves, with our radio and optical telescopes assuming that all alien life will be located far away. But there's also a subset of thinking within SETI that maybe it might be fruitful to look close by, just in case, because there are some plausible ways aliens could be here. And remember, Enrico Fermi asked that given the age of the galaxy, they should be here. So where are they? So here are 10 potentially alien technosignatures that could be found very close, as in right on our doorstep, and some may have even been detected. Number 10. Transients in photographic plates. A recent paper by Beatrice Villarroel, link in the description below, reports that an astronomical photographic plate from 1950 shows tracks consistent with artificial satellites, a full 7 years before the launch of Sputnik. These transients track across the plate in lines consistent with a geosynchronous orbit, which humans did not achieve until 1963, and the objects are rotating consistent with how a geometrically shaped satellite would do while glinting in the sunlight. And it's not just one candidate, there are at least 3, years before we even had satellites. If the plates hold up, they still need to be examined for defects and other plates searched to corroborate it, and indeed to look and see if the objects are still there, then this will be among the most perplexing stories in recent years within SETI. It would be very unlikely for a rock in space to come to a geosynchronous orbit. and it's equally unlikely that someone had leapfrogged the Soviets before Sputnik. We just did not have the rocket technology in 1950 to do it, and the V-2 rocketry of World War II was not capable of launching like that. So if confirmed, we'll need to know what they were, and, if artificial, who put them there and why. Number 9. The Close WASP Signal Hypothesis. One of the biggest mysteries within SETI to date was the infamous WASP signal of 1977. I've covered that signal in other contexts before, but this signal is often talked about as though it had been of distant origin, that it had emanated from light years away. But there are problems with that. One aspect of the WASP signal was that it was unusually strong. In fact, it was the strongest signal ever picked up by that SETI experiment. If the source was distant, it was extremely powerful. At least terawatts of energy would have had to go into it. But not so if it originated close. A lesser-known fact about WOW is that the discoverers of it, Jerry Eman, John Krause, and Bob Dixon, were able to calculate the minimum distance WOW could have been in order to fit the antenna pattern of the telescope. Turns out it was at least halfway the distance to the moon, which suggests strongly that WOW was not interference from Earth, but that only constrains just how close the source could have been, not how distant. But it is possible for it to have originated in or near the solar system. But if WOW originated close by, there is another odd aspect to it. WOW's frequency was shifted just above the 1420 MHz hydrogen line. This could have been intentional, or it could have been a very slight blue shift, meaning the source of the signal was at the time slowly moving towards us at about 10 kilometers per second. Number 8. Long-delayed echoes. The ionosphere is strange. In radio, it can cause all sorts of odd effects. One is that it can refract radio waves and cause all sorts of echoes, as ham radio operators well know. Sometimes this also results in picking up an AM radio station hundreds of miles further away than intended. But it has its limits because radio is traveling at the speed of light, and the atmosphere is constantly changing. And that brings in the mystery of long-delayed echoes, or LDEs, where radio signal is returned back to the sender after seconds of delay. It's asking a lot of the ionosphere to hold a signal like that for that long, so it's been advanced that an alternative explanation is something in space doing it artificially. Say something picks up a signal from Earth and tries to say hello the best way it can, by repeating the signal back in an unnatural way. Unfortunately, this suffers from a problem. Since you don't know the interval at which it chooses to return the signal, you can't know the repeater's distance from you. You can put an outer limit on it, but the consistency at which LDEs occur is all over the board. Still, they remain an unsolved mystery. Number 7. Exhausted asteroids. The solar system is about 4.5 billion years old, and for most of that history it's had a very pristine asteroids and Kuiper Belt objects and even comets that have never visited the inner solar system that have remained nearly unchanged since their formation. This means that most of the solar system's small objects like asteroids should have a pristine makeup as far as elements like iron, nickel, iridium, etc., even if they have been altered by shock or heat. 4.5 billion years is a long time, and should an alien civilization that happened to be passing through in some form stopped here to replenish needed materials by mining an asteroid, it would leave a permanently depleted asteroid that we could geologically detect. We're early in the game here as far as exploring the compositions of asteroids. There are many thousands that we've never looked at, and we continue to discover previously unknown ones on a regular basis. So it may be that in the coming centuries we may find a depleted asteroid that reveals the past transient presence of an alien civilization. And that's not the only option. Jupiter particularly can capture interstellar objects and deposit them at known points in the solar system as a kind of collection area. It's possible that a defunct piece of alien technology could be found at one of these points in the future. But that's probably all we'll ever know. Who they were, where they went, and when they passed through will likely remain a mystery forever. Number 6. Artifacts on the Moon. Earth is a harsh place. It weathers and subducts entire mountain ranges to the point that mountains that were once snowcaps are now mere hills. This means that anything we do as a species will weather away once we're gone, due to the actions of water, wind, and weather. But the moon is different. While it does have the lunar gardening process where micrometeoroid impacts slowly pulverize the soil, and bigger impacts destroy things, it's a much more long-term process than here on Earth, and it's possible for the moon to preserve evidence of someone having passed through far longer. This opens up the way for searching the moon for artifacts left by civilizations passing by in the distant past. After all, if you find an inhabited planet that may someday spawn a technological civilization, why not leave a calling card? We could even search subsurface using archaeological techniques to look for buried objects. Think 2001's monolith. Searches for this are planned, and while we probably won't find anything, it should be looked for just in case. And you have to ask, what if we find an ancient weapon? Number 5. DNA SETI. Within SETI, it's been speculated that it is possible that at some point early in the history of Earth, a visiting alien civilization might have embedded a message inside the DNA of all life on Earth, and that we should search our own genome for technosignatures. This type of communications has an advantage. DNA as an information storage medium is very long-lived because it can self-replicate indefinitely. There are hundreds of genes within us that very likely go back to the very advent of life on Earth. Again, and this is a long shot, it's merely deemed possible but unlikely, but the genomes of Earth life could be searched for any unnatural-looking sequences that would reveal past manipulation. What kind of information could be stored this way is unknown, but maybe the fact of an obvious manipulation is enough to answer the "are we alone" question. And it has to be noted, some years ago researchers in Russia reported candidates for this within the human genome, but nothing has come out on the matter since. Number 4. The Solarian Hypothesis. One of the stranger possibilities that lie within the realm of being technically plausible within science is the Solarian Hypothesis. There are actually 2 papers out there on variations of this idea, one by Adam Frank and the other by Jason Wright, links in the description below. But the idea is that Earth is well old enough and has had complex life long enough to have spawned a previous technological civilization, that evidence for which wasn't preserved in the geologic record. This would be unsurprising. We've only been highly technological for a short time in our collective history, and if we went extinct right now, most traces of us would be gone in less than 1 million years. We often think of things like plastic as being forever, but they're not. And studies have been done within the geologic record that most things we make break down after thousands of years rather than millions. Even things like concrete won't survive the relentless weathering of Earth's environment, and the geologic record we have access to is very limited and spotty. Eventually it gets down to radioactive isotope evidence, but even that has its limits. As a result, as we head into space where things preserve better, it's possible that we might find evidence of previous intelligence on Earth that wouldn't be alien but rather cousins, in the sense that we're cousins to the animals. Genetically related and from the same planet originally, but not anymore, and while a counterpart could be called extraterrestrial, it couldn't really be called alien in the astrobiological sense. It's an unlikely scenario, but it's an interesting notion indeed. Number 3. The von Neumann EMP Destroyer. One of the more scary subsets of the zoo hypothesis solution to the Fermi Paradox is the idea of the alien police action scenario, where an alien civilization obscures its presence and watches you until you attempt to develop a technology that poses a threat to any civilization in the galaxy. A good example here is generalized AI, where the creation of machine intelligence and indeed machine consciousness is inherently dangerous to the entire galaxy and must not be allowed. We don't know how a machine intelligence is going to think. We simply know that if we were to create a generalized AI, it very possibly could think very differently than we do. In fact, it probably would. Indeed, a question within robotics and AI right now is, will it cheat? If you give a computer a task, and it sees a more efficient way to accomplish that task, then why wouldn't it cheat? After all, it doesn't have the same social learning and morals we do, and let's not lie, plenty of humans cheat on everything from games to taxes. But there's also survival, and if survival is the goal of an artificial generalized intelligence, then it may do anything it can to survive, including eradicating any biological threats it might meet. As a result, it would be advantageous, to say the least, for any pre-existent alien civilization in the galaxy that knows this to stop any civilization that may blunder into a technology that's not only dangerous to itself, but dangerous to everyone else as well. One way to do this is contact. Picture a sentinel probe stationed in a star system to monitor a civilization. At some point, it may try to decide to convince the up-and-coming civilization to not develop a certain technology once they get close to it. But it may be more blunt than that, and the probe simply monitors the situation until things get dangerous, and then goes into attack mode. and starts unleashing technology ending electromagnetic pulses, and essentially sends the budding civilization back to the Stone Age. Perhaps we live in a galaxy with one Overlord Watcher civilization that was first, and all the rest, including us, get reset every now and again to guarantee the first civilization's hegemony, and possibly even its safety. Number 2. UAP and the von Neumann 3D printer. One subject on this channel that I rarely bring up is the issue of UAP UFOs, mostly because of the ambiguity of the field. I am unconvinced of an alien origin for them, though I fully believe people see them. But unidentified is unidentified, and as the Solarian Hypothesis shows, it's going to be very hard to pin an alien origin on UAP, even if some stand up to the bar of science through investigation, such as the Galileo Project. The reality is that the closer the alien civilization is to you, the less likely, both statistically and scientifically, that it is truly of alien origin. To illustrate both aspects of this, on the one hand is the problem of proximity. If you find an alien civilization in SETI literally in the closest star system to you, it's unlikely by proximity because it would imply that the galaxy is absolutely chock full of alien civilizations, and we should see them everywhere readily, in everything from technosignatures to biosignatures. We do not, but at least here we have the possibility that an alien civilization came here because they wanted to study Earth and us. Thus it's a special case. And perhaps intelligent alien life is rare, and they take interest in any occurrence of life scientifically wherever they find it. But then you come up against the distance question. Space is enormous and hard to travel through. You need to expend enormous amounts of time and energy to travel interstellar distances. With the Solarian Hypothesis always sitting in the background, you have to ask the question that even if you have detected a vehicle that is not made by humans, was it made by a prior technological civilization on Earth that simply pulled a Jeff Bezos and left the planet to its own devices and now lives out in the Oort cloud for cold computation purposes, and occasionally visits the homeworld to see how the up-and-coming humans are doing? That's actually probably more likely than aliens coming here, as bizarre of a scenario as that seems. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a plausible scenario for an alien civilization to come here. There's actually a more efficient way than someone from Zeta Reticuli getting in their spacecraft and coming here. Rather, it involves the von Neumann probe concept, where you can put a probe in whatever star system you want at sublight speeds over the course of just a few million years, and benefit from the fact that machines don't care about time as much as we do if they can self-maintenance or go dormant for very long periods. Such a self-repairing probe could also harvest the raw materials of a star system to make copies of itself, or alternatively function as a 3D printer with advanced enough technology to 3D print out anything it wants, including probes that could enter the atmosphere of an inhabited world, giving one plausible way within the framework of science as we currently know it to open up the possibility for an alien origin for the UAP phenomenon. The real problem here, however, is that if there is an alien presence in this star system, they are guaranteed to be more technologically advanced than we are. That means regardless of their intentions, good or bad, they are ultimately in control, not us. And the solution to the Fermi Paradox is the worst one, the Zoo Hypothesis. Number 1. Dark matter aliens and parallel universes. It's no secret that we don't have a complete picture of the universe yet. In fact, it's so woefully incomplete that we've had to conclude that most matter in the universe is invisible other than its gravitational effects, and it can pass through walls. As a result, we know nothing of dark matter other than it must be there in order to affect a gravitational pull strong enough to keep spinning galaxies from flying apart. But we don't know what it is, or what its nature is, or what possibilities lie within it. This has led some to speculate that dark matter could be really complicated, and allow for the possibility of dark matter aliens, or a mirror universe to our own. But that's not the only possibility. It's also been suggested in physics that parallel universes exist both in the many-worlds interpretation, where they are infinitely splitting off from each other, but also in the idea that there may be a parallel universe hovering just above us, from which gravity leaks into our universe from. It's anyone's guess that as we further explore physics and learn, what possibilities will reveal themselves. And then there is the question of what happens if they know more about us than we do of them. Thanks for listening. I am futurist and science fiction author John Michael Godier, currently giving another interview heads up. I recently did a rare radio show appearance on Fade to Black with Jimmy Church, where I was interviewed for over 2 hours, on cam no less, for those that still think I'm an incorporeal disembodied voice, about all manner of strange and unusual things hidden within the boundaries of science. It was a fun conversation. Link to the YouTube version of the show in the description below. And check out my books at your favorite online book retailer, and subscribe to my channels for regular in-depth explorations into the interesting, weird, and unknown aspects of this amazing universe in which we live. One thing the Apollo missions drove home about our nearest celestial neighbor is that it is a very harsh place with almost no atmosphere, dust that's more like asbestos than what we have here on Earth, and zero liquid water on its surface. A harsh mistress indeed, to quote Heinlein, an utterly dead landscape, and it's been that way for billions of years. But this may not have always been the case, to the point that the moon might once have been an abode for life. In a paper by Dirk Schultz-Macook and Ian Crawford, link in the description below, they detail that as study of the moon has progressed in recent years, it has become evident that the moon does possess more water than previously thought, not just locked up in ice in shadowed craters at the poles, but also deep down within its interior. Shortly after the moon formed, after Proto-Earth's collision with Theia about 4 billion years ago, there was a time where it was completely molten. This is thought to have led to a period of outgassing, which might have allowed the early moon to build up an atmosphere of water vapor. And in fact, at one point, it may have been even more substantial than Mars's current atmosphere. Also possible at this time was that the moon may have been generating a protective magnetosphere. As the moon cooled, this might have allowed for liquid water to be present on the surface of the moon for a time, or in protected environments just beneath the surface. Also happening during this period were lots of impacts, which might have delivered the building blocks of life to the moon. This allows for two possibilities. The first is panspermia from Earth. If life arose here, which may have happened as long ago as 4.1 billion years, and coincided with the moon's period of habitability, then it's possible that a meteorite blasted off the surface of the Earth might have contaminated the moon, and for a time, Earth's microbial life might have inhabited two worlds instead of just one. The other possibility is native moon life. We know from Earth that as soon as life could get going on this planet, it did. This may also have been the case for the moon. This leads to several interesting possibilities. The earliest life on Earth is still here. When the plants began photosynthesizing, it made Earth's atmosphere poisonous to these very primitive early microbes, but they didn't go away. They simply retreated to environments where they could continue to thrive, including underground. If any life present on the moon likewise retreated underground as the surface became uninhabitable, and the moon has significant amounts of water and heat below its surface, that life, in principle, could still be there, or fossilized evidence of it. Europa or Enceladus, the moon is not, but it's still a maybe, if a long shot. And it's also possible that life present on Earth now actually originated on the moon, meaning that the Apollo missions were technically Earth life returning to the home world after a long period of being marooned on Earth. Unfortunately, detecting the presence of past life on the moon would be very difficult. The moon shows no evidence of the action of liquid water. Any such evidence would have been destroyed both by volcanism early in the moon's history and also the process of gardening that occurs on the moon as micrometeoroids constantly impact it and slowly resurface it. To find out for sure, geologic evidence from very early in the moon's history would be needed, but it is possible to find it, such as ancient rocks that might be preserved below a solidified lava flow. Still, it will be difficult. But this possible habitable period for the moon is interesting to think about, as is the idea of the moon with a substantial atmosphere. I wonder what it looked like from here. And in celebration of the landing of Apollo 11, let me show you something really cool. This is a MOVA globe, this particular one being a special edition for Apollo 11's anniversary. It shows the landing sites of all the Apollo missions and the mission patches. I've always been huge into globes, so these caught my eye. You can see their Jupiter edition next to the Apollo commemorative. What's really cool about these globes is that they rotate on their own. This is done by using light. You can see the lamp I have is bright enough to get them moving quite well. This is because the environment within the globe is very low friction, allowing the mechanism to spin the globe using very little energy. Definitely one of the coolest astronomy-related products I've seen in a long while, and they have way more than just the moon and Jupiter. Check out their website at www.movaglobes.com, link also in the description below, where you'll find multiple selections for Earth, along with the other planets, and even Pluto in the night sky, along with the limited Apollo Special Edition, available in 4.5 and 6-inch sizes. And they have many other types of globes and products too, such as globe versions of famous artwork, decorative cubes, and more that would all make perfect gifts for just about anyone. Check out MOVA Globes today. Thanks for listening. I am futurist and science fiction author John Michael Godier, currently addressing those that think the moon is made of cheese. It's not. But cheese has indeed been to the moon in the form of thermally stabilized cheddar-flavored cheese spread, not unlike spray can cheese one might dine on here on Earth. Classy, and on that note, check out my books at your favorite online book retailer and subscribe to my channels for regular, in-depth explorations into the interesting, weird, and unknown aspects of this amazing universe in which we live. On this channel, I often talk about the possibility of alien life, but I don't really draw much of a distinction between levels of life as far as discovering it goes. I'd be just as happy to detect alien microbial life as I would be in discovering a full-fledged civilization. In other words, I'll take anything I can get that confirms life in the universe independent of our planet. And while I think intelligent life and civilizations are probably rare, one aspect of life on Earth gives me confidence that we are probably going to find no shortage of simple or even moderately complex life in the universe. It's the sheer resilience of some species of Earth life, so much so that a handful of species can withstand the rigors of space. Other than the obvious lack of atmosphere, one major threat to life that space poses is ionizing radiation. Exposure to this radiation is measured in units called grays, and a mere 5 grays is enough to kill a human being. And anything above 8 is certain death for most life on Earth. There are only a few species of animal that can stand a bit more, such as the German cockroach, which I suppose unsurprisingly can handle up to 64 grays, and also the resilient fruit fly, which can take 10 times that. Most of the microbes also have problems with radiation. E. coli, for example, can only handle about 60 grays before it starts dying. But there are a few organisms on Earth that not only can withstand radiation to truly amazing levels, but can withstand the vacuum of space, so much so that we may someday find them living on some of the other bodies in the solar system. And they also may be among the last living organisms on this planet when the sun finally destroys it. The first of these is actually a family of animals rather than a microbe, albeit a very tiny animal. It's the famous tardigrade, a truly amazing group of species that can go 30 years without eating, live for over 60, and survive a whopping 5,000 grays of radiation. They can withstand temperatures near absolute zero to above the boiling point of water, and they are found in all environments on planet Earth and can even survive the dryness of space for a decade in a sort of dried-up suspended animation that ends once they are returned to water. In one case, a tardigrade that had been bone dry for over 100 years was reanimated, sort of. It moved a leg, though no one is really sure if that qualifies as being brought back to life. Regardless, that particular tardigrade might not make the best material for a Frankenstein-esque reanimation story. Tardigrades can even survive astrophysical phenomena, and in fact have survived all of Earth's mass extinctions that have occurred since they first evolved. In a study done by David Sloan and Rafael Batista, link in the description below, they took a look at the threats that face Earth that can cause mass extinctions of most life on Earth and found that gamma ray bursts, nearby supernovas, and even asteroids all fall short in their ability to cause the extinction of the tardigrade. Only the events surrounding the evolution of the sun will do it, though even then, if they've colonized other places in the solar system, they may continue to persist there. But even the tardigrade has its limits. It can't really be classed as an extremophile like some of the microbes, because while it is incredibly resilient, it's not really designed for the harsh conditions that it can withstand. When dried up or frozen, they can't reproduce or do what tardigrades in normal environments do, and that brings us to something else entirely. That's the lichens, some of which seem to be radio-resistant. Jean-Pierre de Vera and colleagues showed that certain types of lichens protected by niche environments could survive, photosynthesize, and grow on Mars. Add that with research done on the International Space Station, where certain species of lichens survived up to 18 months in the naked conditions of space, and you have a possible scenario of Earth lichens colonizing Mars through panspermia. But now we get to some organisms where radio resistance reaches ridiculous heights. The first is called Deinococcus radiodurans, and like the tardigrade can survive multiple different types of adverse conditions, including very high ionizing radiation, 3 times that of the tardigrade at 15,000 grays. Remember, 5 grays kills a human and 60 kills E. coli. D-radiodurans was actually discovered because of its radio resistance. In 1956, Arthur Anderson was experimenting with sterilizing canned food, and while expecting to completely sterilize a sample with very high radiation, he found that he did not, due to this bacterium, and his sample spoiled. The reason for this bacterium's resistance is that it can rapidly repair its own DNA on an order that almost every other organism on Earth cannot. This has led some researchers in the past to wonder if this organism is even from Earth. While the ability to dry out or go without food is useful, there's really no good reason for an organism to evolve such radio resistance in Earth's low radiation environment. That opened up the notion that it might have evolved on Mars early in life's history in the solar system and was transported here via panspermia, or alternatively, perhaps it spent some part of its evolutionary history in space. This has been largely discounted, however, because as resilient as D-radiodurans is, it bears much genetically in common with the rest of life on Earth. Work done by Valerie Matamore of Louisiana State University showed that the radio resistance is more likely to be a happy evolutionary accident brought on by evolving an ability to completely dry out. The radio resistance was merely a chance side effect of that. Or maybe not. The most radiation-resistant organism found on Earth is a relative newcomer to science, discovered only in 2003. Named Thermococcus gammatolerans, this organism is a mystery. It's very different from D-radiodurans in that it belongs to the archaea rather than the bacteria, and it likes deep ocean hydrothermal vents where things don't usually dry out. While it doesn't seem to be well suited for the rigors of space, this organism can handle radiation like nothing else on Earth. It can sustain a mind-boggling 30,000 gray dose of gamma rays, and no one knows why. Thanks for listening. I am futurist and science fiction author John Michael Godier, currently wondering if there are any dormant tardigrades in the room. I'm surrounded, and be sure to check out my books at your favorite online book retailer and subscribe to my channel for regular in-depth explorations into the interesting, weird, and unknown aspects of this amazing universe in which we live. Language is a tricky and fascinating thing. On the one hand, it could be said to be one of the defining features of our species. We talk, therefore we are intelligent. And it's something we all do. Wherever you find a group of humans, you will find a language. But language is not unique to us. Our cousin species, the Neanderthals, had a hyoid bone, almost identical to our own, and thus they probably also had complex speech. But there are also plenty of indicators that whales, dolphins, and even elephants may have their own forms of language as well, some of them apparently quite complex. How we actually developed language is a huge mystery, one that will probably remain largely lost to the mists of time, but it's worth noting that language is distinct from communication, which is a much more broad term. Most animals can be said to communicate, even if it's just through chemical signals or body language, but a new study on baboons seems to suggest that the origins of human language actually predates us, at least physically. A joint French-American team led by Dr. Louis-Jean Beau studied the vocalizations and mouth and throat anatomy of over 1,300 Guinea baboons, and while the sounds these animals make may seem very different from human speech, the scientists found that present in the baboons' alarm or breeding calls were vowel sounds similar to those of humans, coinciding with an earlier study on monkeys that identified 5 separate vowel sounds in their vocalization. By extension, this would suggest that the origin of human speech could go back further than 25 million years. This calls into question a group of long-standing theories regarding the development of language. The general idea was that language wasn't possible until the appearance of modern humans with our low or descended larynx. This means that the appearance of language coincided with our appearance. This in itself has been called into question before in that it's not actually a unique feature to us. It's known, for example, that certain species of deer also have a similar low larynx. It may actually be that the descended larynx of Homo sapiens is not as important as once thought in the development of complex language. Instead, it may be more about the structure of the tongue and that our vocal system actually developed from structures already present in primitive primate species such as the baboons in the study, at least as far as forming vowel sounds are concerned, which is a key component of speech. But vowels are only one component. How consonants evolved is still not well understood. But I suppose none of this should be surprising. One only has to spend an hour with a talking bird to be blown away by their powers of speech. It gets even stranger when you contemplate that the talking parrot you're looking at is a descendant of the dinosaurs and has a vocal system entirely different from our own. Or go on YouTube and you'll find a myriad of videos of various animals seemingly trying to vocalize something. And while most of this activity would simply be imitation, sometimes it may be more. There are old videos of dolphins apparently being taught to count using their blowhole, and also videos of chimpanzees dynamically using another form of human language, sign language, in a way that's far more than imitation. I've included some links to some of these videos in the description below. It's really quite extraordinary and shows that rudimentary vocalization is not solely the domain of humans. But being me, I have to go off the rails and take it a step further and wonder about aliens. I can't help but to ask if language, as in verbal speech, is something we're going to find very much in alien species. They would have to have some sort of method of communicating with each other to create a technological civilization, but does it need to be vocal? No, it can work like sign language does and be visual. Aliens do not necessarily need powers of speech for complex communications. It could even evolve to be chemical, or it could even be accomplished through bioluminescence, like a kind of biological Morse code, or it could be digital. To go even further off the rails and into the world of futurism, I'll suggest that someday humans may stop speaking at all and simply communicate wirelessly, I won't use the word telepathically, between chips implanted in our heads. Entire thought conversations could be held without saying a word, or we may choose to not pursue that technology because the idea is just too creepy. It remains to be seen. But the one thing we will share with aliens, however, are things that are the same across the universe, like mathematics, physics, chemistry, and so on. Science is the built-in language of the universe, and through it, establishing communications with alien races is possible. We can announce our presence, and so can they. Conversation, however, is a different matter, and any kind of conversation we would have would be maddeningly slow. Thanks for listening. I am futurist and science fiction author John Michael Godier, currently eyeing my cat suspiciously as I think he wants to tell me something, which probably involves cat treats. And be sure to check out my books at your favorite online book retailer and subscribe to my channel for regular, in-depth explorations into the interesting, weird, and unusual aspects of this amazing universe in which we live.
You have fallen into Event Horizon with John Michael Godier. In today's episode, John is joined by Professor Jason Wright. Jason Wright is a professor of astronomy and astrophysics at Penn State and a member of the Center for Exoplanets and Habitable Worlds. He studies stars, their atmospheres, their activity and their planets, whilst also working on SETI. He is a project scientist for NEED, a PI of the Nexus for Exoplanet Systems Science, a co-PI of the Miniature Exoplanet Radial Velocity Array, and a member of the Habitable Zone Planet Finder team. You can learn more about his research on his blog. There's a link in the description, or by following him on Twitter at @astro_Wright.
Jason Wright, welcome back to the program.
Thanks again.
Now, Jason, we were just talking off air about some of the weird incidences that happened around the KSE 8462852 affair that one team actually, or two teams apparently, actually looked at it in laser and found something, and one ended up being an errant cosmic ray, and the other, I'm not sure what happened. Go into detail on that.
Yeah. When Tabby Star became a sensation and everybody was interested in it for the SETI angle, it naturally got targeted by all the SETI programs because, that's how it became famous, is that we tried to use the Green Bank telescope to see if there were any radio signals coming from it. So there are two projects to find laser signals that might come from stars that work in different ways. One is based at UC Berkeley through the Breakthrough Listen project, and they're looking for continuous wave lasers. So someone shining a laser all the time. And it turns out, it doesn't take that much energy to outshine a star if you use a laser, and you're only concerned about outshining the star at that one wavelength, that one color. And so that's what they look for, is that. And they looked at lots of targets. They looked at Tabby Star, of course, and then when they went to go publish their results and see if they had anything interesting, they wanted to publish their very best candidate as an example of what they were looking for. And wouldn't you know it, the very best candidate they had was Tabby Star. In this case, it turned out that what they had found was a cosmic ray. So this is a misnomer. It means an energetic particle, a product of radioactive decay. And so basically, our detectors are so sensitive that even the trace amounts of uranium, let's say, in the walls of these observatories will occasionally give off a particle. And that particle will hit the CCD and you'll detect it. And it'll be really bright and it'll be really obvious and it'll often look like a laser line. And so we call these things cosmic rays because they have similar properties to the energetic particles called cosmic rays that come from space, even though they're actually coming from the walls. There's kind of a joke in astronomy that if you see something really weird that doesn't make any sense, you just ascribe it to cosmic rays. A cosmic ray hit the detector. Or maybe a cosmic ray went into my computer and it messed up the calculation and that's why that thing didn't work. And you run it again and it never happens again. The running gag. Something weird happens, something goes bump in the night, doesn't make sense, never happens again, cosmic ray.
Now, speaking of uranium in the walls, uranium in a star, we have a candidate technosignature, and it is a Przybylski star, which seems to show some very, very strange elements within it, including apparently uranium and upwards, according to one study. If that is indeed there, is this the closest we have come to saying that could be due to an alien civilization's activities?
Yeah, so Przybylski star is one of my favorite astrophysical enigmas. It's just so neat. It belongs to a very strange class of star, at least we think it does. It's really anomalous, where it's very slowly rotating and they have very strong magnetic fields. And apparently this combination of the temperature of the star and the strong magnetic fields causes the different elements in the atmosphere to segregate and form layers. So all of the, let's say, I don't know, we'll pick something like nickel or something in the atmosphere of the star will get concentrated at one layer. And if that layer is deep enough that you can't see the layer, then you won't see any nickel in the star at all. Whereas another element in the star, like, I don't know, molybdenum or something like that, might all concentrate much higher in the atmosphere where you can see it. And then you'll see an amazing amount of molybdenum, like much more than you should ever have any right to see in any star, because you've got all of the atmosphere's molybdenum right there where you can see it in that thin layer. These are called chemically peculiar stars, AP stars, and they really have strange abundance patterns. But Przybylski's star is just totally off the charts. It has so many spectral signatures of so many elements, so many transitions of so many elements, that we actually have a very hard time identifying any of them. And this is because the heavier elements on the periodic table have lots of different ways that their electrons can transition. They provide many different wavelengths of light where they can absorb. So if you put enough of this stuff, enough of these heavy elements in the way, all those lines will overlap and it's just a complete mess and you can't identify anything. Sort of, I guess, like, trying to pick out, one piece of music when many, many pieces of music are playing. If you just have enough of them, there's just too many and you can't tell them apart. So people have heroically tried to identify these lines. One problem is that we don't actually know at exactly what wavelengths a lot of the heavier elements absorb, just because no one cares enough to go measure very carefully. But the one study that tried the hardest at this and really did their best to identify the lines concluded that they had confident detections of transuranic elements, of actinides. And this should not be possible because the elements they were discovering have half-lives of like 100 years, or in some cases just less than a year. And such elements can't exist in nature because they decay away far too quickly. And so it's impossible. It has to be a line misidentification, which is not surprising because we can't identify any of the lines. So it's clearly just a mistake. But there does exist the possibility that, maybe it's technologically generated. So, why would there be technologically generated short-lived radioisotopes in this star? The original proposal for this goes back, as far as I can tell, to Carl Sagan and Shklovsky, who it goes back to Shklovsky and Drake, I think, who apparently made the suggestion that if you wanted to let people know you were out there, you could put something, like plutonium in a star or technetium in a star, and then anyone who noticed it there would know it had to have been put there. They called this salting stars. And so that could be a really interesting beacon and very energy efficient too. You just have to put the material in there, and then the star has it and it'll shine, and everyone will be able to detect it for, as long as the star's around. So it could be a beacon. The second idea is that it might be a repository for fissile waste. So this was a suggestion of the times, made around 1980, when disposal of fissile waste was a real problem. I mean, it's still a real problem, but when it was a really salient problem on a lot of people's minds, it's gone away for some reason. That, you could just get rid of it by dumping it onto the sun or something like that. Now that's an absolutely terrible idea. You should, the last thing we should be doing with our nuclear waste is putting it on gigantic towers of rocket fuel and lighting them. It's far too dangerous. Who knows? Maybe someone's doing that, dumping a lot of fissile waste into the star. It seems a little far-fetched to me, but the suggestion's out there, so it's entertaining to think about.
Now, what of technetium with this star?
I don't know if it exhibits technetium. I think actually technetium is observed in space. This isn't really my field, but I think it is actually produced in supernova, I guess, and so sometimes you do see it perhaps. But you don't find it on Earth because it's all decayed away in the 5 billion years that Earth has come along. But like I said, with this star, it's hard to identify anything. The elements they identify are all transuranics, like actinium and einsteinium and these things.
Pretty hard elements to arrive at. Now, astrophysically, say that stuff is actually in there.
Yeah.
Is there a special circumstance where it could be being produced on a continuous basis, say bombardment of a neutron star or something like that?
There was a paper that suggested that if there were a nearby neutron star, you could somehow do the chemical nuclear reactions necessary to generate it. The problem is there's no neutron star around it. I mean, it's a clever idea, but this star doesn't have any companions. Those lines that we see, they're always at the same frequency. We see them just constantly at the same frequency. So that means there's no Doppler shift, no changing Doppler shift, which means nothing's orbiting the star. We know that to very high precision. So there's no neutron star. Actually, my favorite suggestion, which is really clever, is that they are the decay products, the daughter products of a reservoir of some other element that is more slowly decaying. So the idea is that there is some stable element out in an island of stabilities, the physicists call it, that we've never synthesized, that we've never made elements heavy enough to notice that they're stable for, who knows, thousands, millions of years. It's possible. Most calculations say all of the elements up there are extremely unstable, but some suggest that there might be an island of stability. So if for whatever reason this star has a lot of that element, and we don't have any of it on Earth, so it's unclear why they'd have it, but we don't. But okay, let's just say a special supernova enriched it or something. Then this element might be in the atmosphere, stratified, as this class of star does, and slowly decaying. And that could be the reservoir that's generating all of these daughter or decay products all the way down as it decays down to uranium or something like that. I really like that idea because it means that in principle, if you can confirm these elements are real, and if you can confirm are really there, and you can confirm that they appear in the appropriate quantities to be a decay chain, that you would have detected or at least inferred the existence of a new chemical element in space. And I'm pretty sure the last and only time that's ever happened was with helium. And it would be the first new element found in nature in a long time. So that would be pretty cool.
Well, presumably an entire group of all the way up to this island of stability you would have, above stuff that we've synthesized so far anyway.
No, that's true. We know that they can exist, but yes, you will have discovered them. That's right. You will have discovered them, and maybe you could tell from the lines in the spectrum which ones they were and actually do some spectroscopy of them. That would be pretty cool. I like that idea. It's a really obscure idea, but it's a lot of fun to think about.
It is, and it's interesting because, I don't know that these elements that they've synthesized more recently, muscovium and all those, that they even last long enough to get a spectra off of it.
No, exactly. That's right. And so we wouldn't even know. You'd have to presumably do the quantum mechanical calculation to figure out what the energy levels are. And I'm not a quantum chemist, so I don't know how hard that is. But my understanding is it's very hard and maybe beyond our capabilities right now.
Yeah, I tend to think so. Just synthesizing them is hard enough, and wondering about what kind of chemistry could go on with such an element is just all speculative. Now, other technosignatures. Another one comes to mind, the red spiral.
Oh,
Give
yes.
us an overview of that.
I'm not sure it's a technosignature, but it's a really neat little story. There's a website called Zooniverse where citizen scientists can go and help astronomers with gigantic data sets that are just too big for them to work with. And one of the projects was called Galaxy Zoo. And so the idea was that there were these large all-sky surveys that just took images of the entire sky. And they wanted to do old school galaxy morphological classification, where you say, okay, that's a spiral galaxy, that's an elliptical galaxy, and that's a lenticular galaxy, that's not a galaxy, that's two galaxies. And it's very hard to get a computer to be able to do that without a training set. You have to give it an enormous set where you say, all of these are this, all of these are that, all of these are that, now go do the rest. And so that's what Galaxy Zoo was for, is that all these volunteers learned about the kinds of galaxies and then categorized just thousands and thousands and thousands of these things. It was extremely productive and useful scientific endeavor. But one of the cool things they found was a rare class of galaxy that was not in any of the classification schemes, and that are the red spirals. So the two basic kinds of galaxy are elliptical galaxies and spiral galaxies. And spiral galaxies, they look like pinwheels, like the Milky Way or Andromeda or M51 or something like that. And they've got the great spiral arms, and all along those spiral arms are bright blue stars. And that's because the spiral arms are sites of star formation, and when you form a lot of stars at once, some of them have very high mass. High mass stars are extremely bright. They outshine all of the others, even though they're pretty rare. And they're very blue because they're very hot. And so it's characteristic of a spiral galaxy to have all these blue stars. And then elliptical galaxies generally have very little dust and star formation going on. They're often the products of spiral galaxies that have merged and just burnt up all of their dust and gas as stars and are done forming stars. And so they haven't had any stars form in the last, say, hundreds of millions or billions of years. And as a result, they don't have any blue stars, or they have very, very few blue stars, and for different reasons. And so they are dominated by the light of the red giant stars, which are stars maybe like the sun that have been around for 10 billion years and are now red giants. So the general rule is that elliptical galaxies are red, spiral galaxies are blue. And what the Galaxy Zoo people found were red spirals. They looked like spiral galaxies, but they didn't have any blue stars, and that's really strange. And so the red spirals, as they came to be known, emerged out of that project, and they're an interesting anomaly. The way it's usually explained is that in the past they had a huge burst of star formation, and that all of the stars from that burst, the blue ones are all gone, they went supernova, but the lower mass stars are now red giants. And so the idea is that they do still have star formation. They still do have blue stars. They just have an unusually large number of red giants, and that's why they appear red. And, that makes sense. I think what you mean by technosignature is that there are ideas that if you're a galaxy-spanning civilization and you have ambitions to last a very long time in the galaxy and minimize supernova explosions or worse that might, cause a lot of trouble, that you would somehow suppress high mass star formation and prevent those blue stars from ever forming in your galaxy. And so this galactic engineering, essentially, to make it safe for the species that fills it. And so that might look like a red spiral. And so I think that's what you mean, that red spirals could actually be a technosignature.
So in that regard, so if you're looking at galaxies and you see a galaxy that is very reddened and has a whole lot of excess infrared as though it's full of Dyson spheres, then you might be getting into territory where you can say that is unambiguous, right?
No, I wouldn't say unambiguous. If I saw, it'd be very interesting, right? It would satisfy it would look a lot like proposed technosignatures where, as you say, maybe lots of Dyson spheres, maybe suppress the blue stars. That might be what it looked like. But It would also be consistent with something that had a burst of star formation in the past. That's why it's red, and still has a lot of dust and maybe has a lot of star formation also right now. Maybe it just had a merger, so that would also give you a lot of excess heat. What you'd want to do is look very carefully at the morphology of the galaxy and just see where the infrared emission is coming from. If it's coming from the spiral arms and the sites of star formation, well, that's all it is. It's no big deal. But if it's coming from all of the stars in the whole galaxy, if it's not clumpy the way that dust is, that would be very suspicious. So it would be anomalous to see infrared excess in a red spiral. And in fact, we looked for that. In the GHAT survey, we checked all of the red spirals just to see if any of them had infrared excesses. And indeed, we found a very small number of them had too much infrared radiation, which was pretty strange. And then we wanted to check to see if maybe there are some reasons why that might happen involving ultraviolet light or them being edge on, and we checked that, and those didn't pan out either. And so we think those 4 or 5 galaxies we identified must have some very strange star formation histories to be red and have infrared excesses and have the ultraviolet flux that they do. So we did flag those as interesting anomalies that kind of fit what we were looking for. They're distant and hard to study, and like I say, there's a good natural, there are reasonable families of natural explanations for them. So no, I don't think it's unambiguous.
Now, what about a distance to those galaxies? Because eventually you're looking out so far that there just wouldn't have been time for a civilization to form up in that galaxy from your perspective as seeing it.
Oh yeah, these aren't that far away. These aren't at cosmological distances. And so the light we're seeing left those galaxies when the universe was not very much younger than it is today.
Now, other technosignatures. I think the most weirdest one I've heard of lately is Roger Penrose saying, well, maybe you could send a message from a previous universe by encoding it in the cosmic background radiation. Do you think we should take that step? Is that a step too far?
I'm out of field here. Roger's a brilliant guy with a lot of amazing ideas. I guess I would say that there are a lot of things that have to go right for that prediction to pan out. There have to be other universes. They have to be connected in some way that you can send information from one to the other. I'm not even sure what that would be involved. But also, I mean, if that information is, let's say, encoded in the cosmic microwave background, there's not much information there. Like, the whole cosmic microwave background map is just, it's not that much information. So I don't know how complex such a message could be and still be decodable. Yeah, I'm not going to argue with Roger, but I'm not sure how that would work.
Now, out of all of the technosignatures that you are aware of, potential technosignatures, what's your favorite? What's the one that really fires your imagination the most?
Fires my imagination the most. Well, I like infrared excess waste heat, looking for the inevitable heat that comes from technology's use of energy. Because it could be anything. It requires the least imagination or supposition about what it is they are doing. So I like that. I also am partial to that because that's what I look for, because that's closest to my wheelhouse as an astronomer. I'm not a radio astronomer. I don't build hardware. I don't work with fast electronics and things like that. And so that's the one that I can most easily look for. And so that's the one that I work on. But that's not to say I think it's the most likely one to pan out. I really don't know which technosignature will be the most obvious.
Now, could it be something, we look at, short terms with technosignatures. You either see the Dyson sphere or you don't. But there are also some that are much more long term. So say you're looking at exoplanets and you're doing several centuries of study of Earth-like exoplanets. And all of a sudden you see, or actually let's frame it like this. Aliens are looking at us and all of a sudden Mars becomes habitable again. So you detect terraformers. Now, is that perhaps a more viable way of detecting an alien civilization?
No, I don't think. To terraform a planet would take a very long time. And if it didn't take a very long time, you're unlikely to see it happen. This is the L in the Drake equation, that if you want to detect something, your probability of detecting it, or the number of them that there are to detect, is proportional to how long the technosignature lasts. So if you want to see something change over the course of 10 years, like go from uninhabitable to habitable or something like that, then you're looking for something that took 10 years out of, the age of the universe. And so it's very unlikely that you would just have happened to catch that planet at the moment something like that happened. People have also proposed, for instance, looking for, the evidence of, I don't know, interplanetary warfare or a planet destroying itself, like Praxis or something like that. But again, those are very brief. If something only takes a short while to happen, it must be happening all the time, or you're very unlikely to have caught it. However, things like terraforming are definitely the kind of thing that you might infer technology for if you have some reason to suspect that a planet has been terraformed. So people have suggested looking for habitable planets outside of the habitable zone. Like, how is it that that planet still has that atmosphere at that distance from the star? That shouldn't be possible. Perhaps there's some geoengineering going on. Or let's say you have 3 planets in the habitable zone of some star, and all of them have identical atmospheric signatures. 3 planets, different sizes, different distances from the star, identical atmospheres. That would also suggest terraforming, right? Because you would not expect 3 totally different planets with different insulations to end up in the same way. So I think that's a cool idea for a technosignature.
Yeah, and one that we're getting pretty close to being able to look for that now with James Webb going up and all that.
Yeah, I hope so. It's going to be very hard. It's going to be very, very hard to study terrestrial atmospheres, even with James Webb.
Yeah.
I hope it works.
Well, we're going to be limited to close, maybe we can look at Proxima b or something, but
yeah,
characterizing atmospheres is only just barely now, something that we can start to talk about. But once we do, if you saw, like you said, 3 planets with the same atmospheres, and if it got really interesting and 2 of those planets had CFCs, because that's an excellent greenhouse gas, so you could terraform a world with it, then you're outside of ambiguity at that point, which, ambiguity's always been the plague of SETI. So,
well, no, I don't think ambiguity's been the plague. Radio and laser SETI does not struggle with ambiguity. It can. If they go looking for things other than the sort of canonical narrowband radio signal or the laser, the pulsed laser, they might go looking for more ambiguous technosignatures. But, if you see a narrowband radio signal from space and you confirm it with another instrument, you're done. You win. There's no ambiguity. You've discovered life elsewhere in the universe. But I hear what you're saying.
Unless it fails to repeat because we picked up such a signal.
Well, that's why I said if you confirm it. It's got to be confirmable. You have to be able to know that it wasn't a cosmic ray.
Which is the maddening thing about the WOW signal. It definitely wasn't a cosmic ray.
Well, I don't know what the WOW signal was. Yeah, it would be, and again, this kind of goes back to our rate arguments. If things like the WOW signal were common, then someone would have seen something like it at some point since then. But it still remains this singular event, more powerful and stranger than anything we've seen. If it really was an alien signal from space, then we were extremely fortunate to catch it because it's apparently not a very common phenomenon. And and it's also frustrating because if it never repeats, then there's no way to know that it wasn't just a cosmic ray or something like that. Now, that said, Bob Gray has pointed out that if the WOW source is repeating all the time, we would barely know it because we don't know exactly where that telescope was pointed. We know where it was pointed, but it was a big beam, so we don't know exactly where on the sky it came from. And that region of the sky has not been thoroughly searched at those wavelengths for very long. He estimates that we've probably spent something like 24 hours of total integration time staring at that part of the sky, that entire part of the sky, look and sensitive at those wavelengths. And so it could be, for all we know, blinking at us once every 24 hours, and we still wouldn't know.
Well, he would be the one that looked at it for most of those 24 hours, I would imagine.
Yes, that's how he knows the number.
Yes. So say we get to this point where we find a technosignature. Then we get to have the debate on should we beam a message to it? What's your take on METI?
Okay, so these are 2 different questions. So one question is, once we detect something, should we try to get its attention? The other is, should we be broadcasting deliberately now in an attempt to elicit a response to see if anything's out there. And that's what I think we normally think of in terms of METI. I don't think we should, because I don't think it's likely to work. I know most people say I don't think we should because I'm worried it will work and they're going to come eat us or something like that. My opinion is that these broadcasts are far too weak. They're far too transient to matter. I mean, imagine if there were a civilization out there trying to get our attention and they, blasted in our general direction for an hour. Unless we just happened during that hour to have a radio telescope pointed at the right frequency at that source during that 1 hour out of what, 5 billion years or something like that, it's not going to make any difference. We're not going to catch it. It needs to be something sustained for an extremely long time before it's going to work and get someone's attention. I think things like the Arecibo message are valuable because they remind us how sensitive we are to radio signals at interstellar distances. It gets us thinking about our place in the universe. It gets us thinking about SETI. It gets us thinking about what would happen if we were to make contact. But I don't think they're useful because they have any chance of actually getting attention.
I sort of like the Arecibo signal for another reason, because if in thousands of years as it propagates out, someone sees it, it's going to be their wow signal.
There you go. I do enjoy that symmetry. That's really nice.
Yes. That's when you confuse the aliens rather than contact them. Now, to switch gears, you wrote another paper that fascinated me because the implication of it is that if you did detect some kind of an alien artifact or something like that in the solar system, you may not be able to prove that it's even alien.
Exactly.
Prior indigenous technological civilizations. Give us an overview of that paper.
Yeah, prior indigenous technological species. Yeah, a few years ago, my mind was blown when, and I don't even remember how the idea came, but it was. I know that one of the seeds was thinking about Gavin Schmidt and Adam Frank's work, asking about whether we could rule out a prior technological species on the Earth. And so, whimsically, you would say, how do we know the dinosaurs didn't have cell phones? How do we know? And you think, oh, well, that's silly. We'd see it in the fossil record. But no, the fossil record is extraordinarily incomplete. I mean, out of, millions or billions of dinosaurs that walked the Earth, we have fossils of a few. We really don't know what was around then. Only certain things get fossilized. So they went and they were thinking about the Anthropocene, this idea that that humanity's impact on Earth is now so indelible and so significant that it's worthy of a geological stratum, a name. And so there are these eons and epochs in Earth's history where things changed, and the rock, you can see it in the rock layers. Something was different then. And the argument of the Anthropocene is that we've already done so much work, and we will continue to do so much work to alter the geological layer that we're putting down, that geologists 100 million years from now, going down through the rocks, will be able to say, look, that's where it started, and tell that we were here. And Frank and Schmidt don't dispute that. They say that's true. But given enough time, it won't obviously be technological. Like, something was different then, but you'd be hard-pressed to prove that it was technologically different. There are other things that might have been able to do it. And it's surprising how much of our technology will vanish and just not be around, and certainly not be recognizably technological in just 100,000 years. And they argued that after 1 million or 2 years, there'd be no way to know it's technological at all. And so, in fact, if the dinosaurs had cell phones, we would not know it, because, we wouldn't see the cell phones, and all of the other stuff they did would just be another layer that we would misinterpret. So building on that, I was thinking, well, this could be true everywhere, that if we go and we look at Mars and it seems dead, but we forget how recently it was just understood that Mars had life, had cities and canals and all of that stuff. I mean, 100 years ago, there were respectable scientists who thought Mars probably had life, and even intelligent life. And we got the pictures from the Mariner probes back, and it was just desert, and there was nothing there. And somehow the needle swung all the way to the other side, from probably or maybe has life to definitely never had life in its entire history. And there was no evidence for that. We've never had evidence that lets us go back just what's on the surface of Mars today in terms of life or even technological life. And so I started thinking, maybe Mars did have cities. It wouldn't take that much time for them to be gone. Maybe Venus had cities, and then the global greenhouse effects has just completely wiped them out and they're gone. Maybe Earth has had many technological species in the past. And so if that's true, then if we, as you say, find an artifact in the solar system, the usual idea is that that must have been deposited here by some visitor from interstellar space. But given that Earth has life and it's right there, isn't it more likely that Earth life put it there at some previous spacefaring phase of its history? And I don't know if that's more likely, but it's interesting, I think, that is somehow, to most people, seems like a ridiculous idea, even though we have no evidence for it one way or another.
I think that's interesting because Venus would be an extreme example of this because, number one, that planet apparently had liquid water for a very, very long time, up until, geologically speaking, relatively recently, before it went all crazy. But the thing is, that planet also is even worse than Earth. It apparently cracks open and resurfaces, it completely resurfaces itself, which would completely eradicate any evidence of anything ever having been there.
That's right. If Venus has had a resurfacing, and I'm not sure it's certain that it has, but I know that is a common interpretation of its geology. That's right. Then all evidence of everything that was there is completely gone. It's been totally folded into the mantle, and yeah, you'll never know anything about it.
Now, with Earth, of course, I mean, people don't really realize just how active this planet is in destroying its surface. I mean, it will grind over time entire continents underneath a plate and, basically melt it down. So the vast majority of the history, as you say, of this planet, the fossil record is just not there.
I think it's actually mostly life and erosion. But yeah, your point is well taken. I mean, there are the plates that subduct under the oceans and stuff. We do have rocks that are billions of years old, and a lot of the Earth's surface is billions of years old. But I think people also, as you say, they don't realize how quickly life just destroys everything on its surface. Like if we all vanished, how long would it take before our technology was, not visible anywhere? It's not very long. I mean, if you do special things like build a gigantic pyramid of rock in the middle of a desert, that'll last thousands of years. But almost anywhere else, it's going to go away pretty quickly. And yes, certainly over geological timescales where earthquakes and eventually subduction for some parts of the Earth, yeah, it'll just go away. So deep time is really, really deep, and what seems very permanent now is not on a geological timescale. I agree.
Now, what of Mars? Say this might have happened, hypothetically speaking, on Mars. It probably would last longer, wouldn't it? I mean, say you have a giant piece of rebar concrete, and it gets buried on Mars 50 million years ago. Is it still going to be there in that environment?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question, but I would guess that if you have rebar on Mars, that some biological entity made the rebar, which means you've got life like you have life on Earth. You have a biosphere. And I think that the biosphere would destroy the rebar pretty quickly.
Yeah, the rebar, definitely. The concrete, though, I'm not so sure. Yeah.
Or the concrete. I mean, it's just silicates. So if it buried, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know enough about it. I mean, if it's on the surface, it'll get sandblasted on current Mars, but that also means it'll get buried. So I don't know how long concrete lasts. Yeah, it's a good question.
It could. It also, I guess, conceivably, there's a case of a quarry, I think in Sweden, where they found what appears to be fossilized meteorites, where the traces of the meteorite remained in the sediment, like iridium and things like that. But most of the silicates are gone and it's been replaced. So one wonders if that could happen with an artifact.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, you think about lichens, right? And all they need is sunlight and a rock, and they'll, give them enough time, and they'll just eat the rock.
That's true.
It's a long time. Although, with rocks, I suspect erosion is faster. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if bacteria are also an important player. So I guess that's the paradox, that if you've got the technology and it's indigenous technology, then the indigenous life, if it's anything like Earth life, is not going to let it last for very long. So the main thing is if it were deposited there, if it were like a remote base or something like that, like Elon Musk wants to build on Mars or something like that, if we set something like that up, maybe like the Antarctic station that we have, how long does it last? And yeah, the sand's going to get it pretty quick, but then it'll get buried. And after it gets buried, you don't have any, you don't have much in the way of Mars quakes. You're not gonna have sand blasting it anymore. Maybe you got to worry about meteorite impacts. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, or asteroid impacts for that matter.
Mm-hmm.
If you live long enough in a star system, you're eventually going to get hit, unless you do something about it.
That's right.
Now, what implications does this have on searching for extraterrestrial life? Because if you had a prior technological civilization on here or Mars or Venus, and they left and decided, we're going to go out to the Oort cloud because we can compute more efficiently because it's colder or something like that, then even if you got evidence, an artifact of them or something like that, you could never say that they were actually alien because it's just Earth life. And even if they were genetically very different, well, maybe they have full command of their genetics and customized it. So you can never actually say at a certain distance that something is unequivocally alien.
It's true. You can't prove a separate genesis. You can't prove a separate abiogenesis event just from that artifact. I mean, some people would go farther, though, and say that even if we find definitively extraterrestrial life, maybe that radio signal from a distant star, well, maybe the origin of life on Earth is common to the life that was on that star. Maybe that was Earth life that went over there, or maybe the panspermia hypothesis is valid and someone seeded both places. So the separate origins is always going to be a puzzle unless they know the answer and they tell us. But that seems far-fetched to me, but maybe.
But then you have to trust them.
That's true. They could be just feeding us a line.
This is actually one of the reasons I'm more actually interested in microbial life in the universe, because there you don't really have that kind of possibility of subterfuge. It's either related to us or it's not. So you.
Oh, you mean if you find it in the solar system, then you can check genetics.
Yeah, if you find it. Yeah. If you find it at Europa and you look at the genetics and you're like, there is just no commonality at all, then you can say, okay, the universe teems with life.
I would not be surprised if in a couple thousand years, the humans on Europa managed to stock the subterranean ocean with all sorts of genetically modified fish that can live in Europa. And it could be a completely synthetic life form they've designed to be there. I mean, we're already talking about generating synthetic life here on Earth. And so, give us thousands of years, and I bet we'll have lots of synthetic life that has no lineage with any other life on Earth. And perhaps we'll build it exactly because it thrives in space. So, I don't know.
And maybe it'll even exhibit convergent evolution artificially. So it looks like a shark. So you have a giant artificial European space shark.
That's right. And it turns out we made it.
Which is now again, this goes back to the thing that's better than aliens. If we can do something like that, that's more interesting than an alien civilization.
Yeah.
Which honestly, I do wonder in regards to biosignatures, if we don't really have a better chance of understanding abiogenesis actually from a test tube. In other words, the alien life comes out of a test tube.
Yeah.
From the biologist looking into the origins of life, which seems like that's probably going to happen within our lifetime. So even if we don't find a biosignature or a technosignature, if it looks like the chemistry of abiogenesis is easy, then we can still look out there and say, yep, it's everywhere. At least microbial life.
Yeah. It's possible. My personal suspicion, and this is an uninformed suspicion, is that abiogenesis is hard. It might be very common. It might have happened in the blink of a geological eye on early Earth. That's possible. But the blink of a geological eye might mean a million years of a lot of things going just right. And it's possible that there's no substitute for just waiting. That these reactions are extremely unlikely, that you need just the right foam bubbles on a tide pool, this and that, and that there's no way to hurry it up and simplify it and do it in the lab. It's possible that we'll always just be wondering, well, this is probably how it happened, we think. I don't know.
Well, the one interesting thing about that, though, is that however it happened, it seemed to happen just as soon as it was possible in this world.
That is consistent with evidence, but I've heard it persuasively argued that it's not that ironclad, that the dates on those rocks and the evidence for life in those rocks, which is isotopic, it's not even in the rocks, it's in these little minerals in the rocks of particular isotopic ratios that are consistent with life. I think it's an ambiguous biosignature, and so it's certainly possible, like I said, that life arose as soon as we had water on the surface. But it's also possible, this is hard, that we've overinterpreted that evidence, and it actually took, let's say, I don't know, that it took 100 million years. I don't know the numbers. I'm not a geologist. But that it was actually on the long side. And if that's the case, then maybe it was a rare event on Earth.
But, the universe does not like uniqueness, so there are probably other examples.
No. We're not unique. That's true. Life is not unique to Earth. I am pretty
I think I can confidently say that. Now, what do you think about civilizations, though? Do you think, your gut feeling, are civilizations relatively common, or is intelligence just very, very rare? And that explains the Fermi Paradox.
Well, the question is, what's the hard step? It's possible that Earth had many hard steps, from abiogenesis to, cells to multicellular life, and then from multicellular life to life with, they can be social or can use tools. I think Earth has had many examples of intelligent tool-using species and social species, right? We, as far as we know, are the only one that is social and tool-using and language-using and has all of the things that we do that give us so much technology. But we have plenty of examples of very intelligent species here on Earth today, octopuses and dolphins, plenty of social species, plenty of tool-using species. So I'm kind of surprised, given that we're the very first to figure out technology. And I bet there have been species that found technology and maybe even found, fire and built things. I mean, beavers build dams and stuff, but beyond just instinct, but really solving problems and developing new technologies. I'd be surprised if we were the first on Earth. I would not be surprised if we're the first to do geoengineering and build big cities and rockets. That seems right that we are the first to have done that, but again, we don't actually have evidence. So that's it for me. If life, multicellular life with neurological capabilities like animals, is common, then I think technological species are common. So I think we're either going to find, we're not going to find lots of forest moons and things like that and not find technology, I think, with at least some of them.
Now, my last question for you relates to yet another paper. What is the aurora effect?
The aurora effect, yes. So this was Adam Frank's idea, based on a novel by Kim Stanley Robinson. The aurora effect is that not every habitable planet is habitable. Wait, oh shoot, I can't remember how he phrases it. But it's based on a novel where humans go to a planet and it seems like a great place to live, but it turns out that because of the stuff already living there, it's not. You can't live there. You can't also be there. And maybe the aliens from War of the Worlds discovered that about Earth. It looked like a great place to be, but it turned out that they just couldn't live here. So the reason this came up in this paper is that we wanted to understand how severe the Fermi Paradox is. Specifically, Fermi's original articulation, which has nothing to do with SETI, asking why aliens aren't here in the solar system today, aren't obviously here in the solar system today. And the argument is just a crossing time argument, that even with today's technology, we can create spacecraft that, given enough time, can get to nearby stars and even cross the galaxy. Now, enough time means hundreds of thousands or millions or tens of millions of years, but that's fine. Those time scales are short compared to the age of the galaxy. So there's been time if there have been other technological species, for them to have populated and settled the entire galaxy if they were so inclined. So the question is, why haven't they? Or if they have, why don't we notice them here in the solar system? So one piece of the puzzle in the paper was, well, how do we know they haven't? What's our evidence horizon? And so based on his work with Gavin Schmidt, they said, all right, let's be generous and say 10 million years, that if they were here in the last 10 million years, we would have noticed. So then the question is, well, how often do they visit? So we ran some models of how long it would take to visit all the stars in the galaxy. And we don't know how often they would launch ships or how fast their ships are or anything like that. So we just parameterized it all and said, well, if the ships are typically this fast, if this fraction of stars are the sorts of places that they could settle and launch new ships from. And we tuned those parameters and just saw under what circumstances you would expect a star like the sun to have been visited in the past 10 million years, and under which circumstances 10 million years is a perfectly reasonable time to go without being visited. And so that helped us put constraints on how ubiquitous space travel must be among technological species in the Milky Way.
And do you expect it is ubiquitous? Because, I mean, space travel is also very hard.
It's not very hard. We do it. It took us, I'm serious. From the development of flight to the first interstellar probes was decades, just a few decades. So I don't think it's hard in that sense. It's hard in the sense that I think the hardest part of the problem of going to nearby stars is building something that will last long enough to get there. The rockets aren't the hard part. The hard part is, how do you build something that very far from a star will still be going and useful in 100,000 years? And that we don't understand. We do not understand how to build machines that last anything like that amount of time. So it would presumably have to be something that can repair itself. Perhaps, it's a colony ship and it's people that are doing the repairing. I don't know, but that's the hard part. But it also doesn't feel so hard that we'll never do it on a cosmic timescale to me. We already can draw the outlines of how such a thing would work. Hollow out an asteroid, use its mass for propellant, off you go. So the fact that we can outline and describe it, and it doesn't violate any laws of physics to build a slow ship, suggests to me that it's actually not that hard if we could basically do it.
Well, and you can also reframe it, because if you build, say, hollowing out an asteroid, and you build a gigantic generational ship, eventually it can be so extensive that it is a world. So
right.
As you space travel, you're just going about life on a world, more or less.
That's right. Exactly. Right. If it's spinning, you've got your gravity. And if it's big enough, it's got enough propellant to go, kind of fast. The asteroid gives you plenty of shielding from everything on the outside. You've got all the raw materials you need to keep it going. I guess, I don't know, you do fusion or fission or something for your energy. And that's right. If it's a generation ship, then it's its own world. But the other thing is, by the time it arrives, they're no longer really Earthlings, right? They would be our genetic descendants. But 100,000 years of your own culture, with Earth just getting ever farther away, you can communicate with Earth and try to maintain that culture. So, as long as stuff on Earth is still transmitting, you can still receive and answer and interact. But when you're that disconnected, you're going to be your own thing by the time you get there. So I guess they're Earthlings biologically, but culturally, they'll just be doing their own thing when they finally get there.
Yeah, they might not even know that they were from this world or anything like that.
Yeah. Earth would only be a couple light years away.
Right.
So, they could still phone home as long as there was someone to answer.
Well, if you've got enough of these things, it goes sort of like the von Neumann probe, where,
No, exactly.
You can colonize the entire...
That's what we found in our simulation. Right. Once they're there, how long until they launch another one? And you're like, oh, well, why would they do that? Well, I don't know, give them 100,000 years, someone's going to do it.
Well, yeah.
And so that was one of the parameters in our simulation, was how long does it take them to launch another one? And we were pretty conservative. We decided they'd only do it every 100,000 years or something like that. And that's still plenty to effectively create, as you say, a von Neumann machine, this self-replicating series of settlements that quickly takes over the whole galaxy.
All right, Jason, we are out of time. It's been a fantastic interview, and I think the thing that I'm worried about most is if aliens that are colonizing the galaxy in the far future come here and they see Europa and they say, that looks exactly like the place we want to colonize, except the humans have infested it with artificial space sharks. and they move on.
Maybe the Europa report was about their ship.
Yeah. It was great talking to you, Jason. I hope you come back.
All right. Thanks for having me.
John, why is the car back? I thought we'd passed that story arc.
What? The LeBaron's in the driveway.
Well, not quite.
L. Baron. It's missing an E. Wait, the whole car's been altered.
This technology is far beyond human capabilities.
An alien civilization upgraded the LeBaron. Can I translate that?
He said that his space probe encountered it, and it wants a new carburetor.
Well, I guess I could call Randy.
Please close your rear hatch.
It's got a force field.
All monitoring systems are functioning.
The LeBaron's become a techno-signature. It's consuming the driveway for raw materials.
Oh, a Von Baron probe. Magnificent.
Thank you.
It's gonna cost a fortune to pour a new driveway.